Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you back to day 29 of our daily devotions. Just wanted to give you guys some updates on some things that are going on at a church. Number one, we want to hear from our church members. So if you have a birthday or anniversary coming up, please reach out to us so that we can announce it on church every week. Um, and just have a time of that where we can celebrate with you all. Also, if you want to send a message to the church, kind of church-wide, just praying for them, letting them know maybe a verse that's meant something to you this week, please email me at tom@oakridgebaptist.net, and we can get you uh, set up with that as well. Um, we want to just find ways that we can stay connected during this time. This morning at the Lighthouse, and you might see some pictures on Facebook, but this morning at the Lighthouse, we were blessed to have quite a bit of food donated to uh, for residents and in the community. We're able to give to help out over 100 family, or almost about 100 families, and providing them produce. And this is something that we all we did was basically provide a room. All these were donated through different groups and ministries in this area, and they're all here to um, help out. Not just Latonia Lakes, but just the kind of the Taylor Mill area, Hans Pike, Regal Ridge, all of those areas. We are so happy about that. We got to see, there was so many pounds and pounds and pounds of potatoes and onions and watermelon and apples and carrots, and all of that is going to be given today to people that need it. So we are so thankful to see how God is continuing to work in our church and our ministries and um, through the Lighthouse. So today we're going to be continuing our study in Corinthians, and we're going to talk about how we win the war, or I thought about how we win the game. Um, and Paul has already talked about offering. He has talked about gift giving and resources, and uh, instructing the church of Corinth on giving uh, and offering. And then he kind of pivots back to his own ministry. And this is where we pick up. So we're in Second Corinthians chapter 10. And it reads, I, Paul, myself, entreat you by the meekness and gentleness of Christ, I who am humble when face to face with you, but bold toward you when I am away. I beg of you that when I am present, I may not have to show boldness with such confidence as I count on showing against some who suspect of us walking according to the flesh. For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ, being ready to punish every disobedience when your obedience is complete. So, a lot of stuff kind of happening where Paul's talking about like what's going on in his ministry. And I remember when I was younger and I read this and I thought that Paul sounded really arrogant. And the reason why I thought that is that because I always thought that I thought it would be always weird to have someone say, "I am humble." If you had a friend that said, "I'm humble," they're probably not humble. And here Paul's saying, like, I am humble when face to face with you, and like obviously this is a translation difference. Like, I don't think Paul was saying like, "Hey guys, I am so much more humble than you all. I am just overabundant in humility. I am so godly compared to you." No, that's not what he's saying. He's basically talking about you know, who who he is in different groups of people. Um, that when he's with this church, he's humble. That it's not about him. It's not about his gifts and his talents, but but when he's away, you get this boldness because, um, and I think this kind of reveals a lot about us. How often we feel much more bold when we're further away from people. Um, like it seems like we have this, especially with social media. How much braver we are on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. compared to being face to face? Would you feel comfortable saying what you say online to a person? If you had to look that person in the eye, would you comment that, or would you write that? Would you write that email knowing that you would have to read it to that person's face? It's tough. We are much more confident and bold when we're further away than when we're face to face because we see those people. And here Paul is talking about that. I mean, I am humble when I'm face to face, but bold. And he starts to introduce this idea of walking according to the flesh. And this is something like I feel like as a church and even as me, like I need to talk about this more. The idea of the flesh, because I think so often we like to um, blame Satan, and like it's true, Satan does a lot of horrible things and tempts us, but like there are a lot of things that I think we blame Satan for that is totally just us. It's our flesh. And Jesus talks about this. Paul talks about this, about our flesh being. I mean, think about like we are the ones that sinned. It wasn't Satan sinning, and like we just happened to get in the crosshairs of it. Like no, we we sinned. Our flesh. We have a sinful nature. But when we blame Satan for everything that we've ever done, it kind of feels like we're letting ourselves off the hook. But really, we need to start saying, like this is me, this is my flesh, I need to be careful. And like as a new creation that we've already learned earlier in this letter, that we should not be walking according to the flesh. But we still have the flesh. We still sin. We still mess up, which means that we need to depend on God every single day. Verse 3, for though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. We like playing games. We like playing board games. I enjoy playing board games with our family, and with the youth we play board games. And um, you know, I don't know how you all are when you play board games. When you first open a board game and you just want to play it, or do you want to read all the rules about it, so that, or you argue over rules, or you have that person that's always constantly holding the rules up to make sure that everyone's following the rules. And you have people that are like very adamant about how we do it, and there's others like, well, this is more fun, let's play it this way. um, but what's you know difficult is when you play a game and it just seems like, well, the idea of what rules is limiting what you can do. So like, everyone's taking a turn. Like, let's think of Uno. Everyone has probably played Uno in their life. So when you lay a card down, then the person next to you, like, that's in the rules. We go in a line. You don't just lay all your cards down and say, I win. All these rules limit you and make it so that it can either be fair or that you just can't, ultimately win at the very first time. Like, it makes it challenging. It gives you, and so, like, have you ever been in an argument and you just like, man, I want to win this argument. I want to win. I want to defeat them. Or you have this person who is always going against you, and it seems like you're an enemy of them, and like you just always constantly are battling with them. Maybe it's a family member or a friend even, and like you always have to outdo them, and like you always feel like you're in this battle with them. Or maybe it's someone that you just don't like. Maybe it's a neighbor. Maybe it's like someone that is around you, and you just constantly find yourself arguing with them, and you just seeing them or hearing them really just makes you angry. And we're in a time right now where we are more divided in so many different issues. This stress of this virus, this situation that we're in, has produced this idea that, like, we have people that are scared, and we have people that don't know what to do, and both of those produce this feeling of you know sides being drawn of who's right and who's wrong, who's making the best decisions, who's making the worst decisions, who should we be following, who how well should we be criticizing our leaders, and how much should we put trust in them, and how much should you know it's all these different sides, and you see on Facebook and Twitter and online and on the news, like everyone has a take on things, and you're just like, well, how do we as Christians win this war? How do we come out on top? And Paul talks about this. And he actually says in this verse, "For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh." And he's basically saying the best way to win the war is not, the best way to win the game is to not play it. You can argue someone forever. You can argue with someone, you can argue and fight and fight and fight. There's this wonderful quote that I heard from Philip Yancey. Um, I didn't know he said this, and like I said it one time, and I thought I think this is a quote from somewhere, and I looked it up, and it was from him, and he was like, kind of paraphrasing, but he's like, I never knew anyone that came to know Christ because they lost an argument. And I've thought about that. Like, how often do we see someone say, they come away from a fight or an argument and they're like, you know what, you're right, I'll just become a Christian. Like that doesn't happen. But we so often want to prove and validate our feelings and thoughts, and we want to boost our own ego that we're willing to fight and kind of join in on this battle that's been going on. But that's not what Christ calls us to do. Because when we do, we limit ourselves to what we can say and what we can do. When we have to, like, uh, back then, this is talking about, the Roman persecution. We had people that were literally like fighting, and Paul was saying, like, we're not going to fight people. We're not going to physically have an army and kill people over this, following Christ. We're not going to do that. We're not going to fight according to the flesh. And I think today, a more modern idea would be like, we're not going to, get into these like internet debates and these fights and these things that can be so personal and so full of hateful language. There's so many times where I've heard people use the worst language and the way they talk about it, and like the subject matter is church. And um, realizing that God is in control. So I had two friends that I grew up with, and I went to church with them, and they were arguing about something, and and it was about what church's response should be in this situation. And they were talking about the government and the church, and I cared about them, and they were two of my friends that I've known growing up, and it kind of hurt me to see that they were arguing, and the language that they started using and how they were describing our culture and the church, and it just made me sad, and I felt tempted to think of like 10 points of why one side was right, one side was wrong, and like do what they were doing, jump into this argument and this debate. And I don't like doing that. I don't like fighting online because I just don't feel, I don't see anybody changing their mind that often. I don't see things being done by the posts that we put on Facebook and the things that, like, I just maybe it is, but I just don't see things getting done by people complaining online. And so instead, I just to put perspective in, I didn't follow their rules of, having a point and backing it up with this argument and these facts and this whatever. I just put my own experience because at the time, one of our youth came to know the Lord, and that's what I put. It had nothing to do with their argument, and I didn't exactly know why I was putting up, but like I think God was wanting me to tell them, just like, I'm still working. How often we want to fight and argue and hurt one another, people in the church and people outside the church, and we just want to pick a fight with everyone to show that we are right, that we are strong, and we're fighting over things while so many people are literally dying not knowing who Christ is. That we think that God can be limited by what we're doing. God will still move. God is still able. Does that mean we don't obey him? No, absolutely not. But this idea that we can't, that we can control what God does is always going to be our worst decision. We don't practice voodoo. We follow Christ. And so Paul talks, he says, the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ. Have you noticed that Paul's not even saying like we fight back with arguments? He says it's through our obedience. So before we fight back and tell people why they're wrong because of a certain issue, are we living out what Christ has told us to? And I always come back to the Great Commission. He didn't say make disciples by winning arguments and winning debates, by presenting arguments and making people submit by how smart and how intelligent you are. Now, I believe that you should know what you believe. I believe in apologetics and studying and learning why we believe what we believe. Absolutely, we should be doing that. But what we need to be focused on is, are we obeying Christ? Are we really fighting for Christ? Or are we fighting for our own ego? It's tough. And it's something that we've seen generation after generation. This isn't just a young person thing. This is something I've seen in multiple generations, where people are just arguing and wanting to show that they are right. But what we need to realize is we aren't. We aren't right. We aren't okay. God is right. And so many times when we are saying, I'm going to fight for God, I'm going to fight for the cross, I'm going to fight for Christ. Are we really? Or are we fighting for ourselves to make ourselves superior? Are we the God that we're trying to push, or is it really God that we're trying to push forward? And when you look at what Christ did, he wasn't out fighting and arguing and demeaning people that were in the secular world. He was arguing and getting angry with people in the church world. And I know, we like to think of Pharisees and Sadducees as these, people that everyone hated, but no, they were the religious celebrities. These were like what we would be considered the best sellers of Christian literature. These are the ones that people would aspire to be. And this is the one that Jesus had issue with, because they weren't following God. They were following their own agenda. There are so many things that we should be doing as Christians and promoting. There's some issues that we should absolutely be passionate about. But how we win the war, how we win this game, is we don't play it. We don't follow these rules. We don't jump in. We do it through obedience. We do it through prayer. We do it through love. We do it through grace. We teach. We make disciples. We could pass every single law to fit our Christian world. But what good would that do if it didn't mean that one soul was saved during it? Christ told us to follow him. Christ told us to follow what he did, to love others, to love God with everything we have, to care for the poor and the sick, the fatherless, the widow. We need to do that. We need to follow him. Let's pray. Dear God, we just thank you for this day that we can come here and just again study your word. Lord, I pray right now that you just help us to think about what the battle is, what the game is, and wondering if what our intentions are of winning. Humble us, Lord. Help us to be more obedient to you and less obedient to an agenda. Because these issues didn't die for our sins, you did. And we are nothing without you. Lord, we pray this in your Son's name. Amen. Hope you guys are having a great day. We are going to have some more updates for you soon with church. So stay tuned through the Facebook, or let people know. And again, if you know someone that doesn't really have a Facebook or can stream, please let us know so we can give them a copy of our service. We would love for them to still be to hear from us, and we would love to hear from them as well. So we are still working and finding ways that we can stay connected. So I guess I'll see you guys tomorrow.